The Joestars are effective in their own franchise, but how effective are they in others? Taking on Hunter x Hunter, we're going to see how they go about the Hunter exams and where they land. If this video gets 6,000 likes, I will for sure do another. That goes the same for the Hunter x Hunter kill count from before, for those asking. Now, the Hunter Association gives us specific types of hunters that you can be. The current types of hunters that we know now aren't all the types. From what I understand, Togashi can create a new type of hunter out there, not exactly purely out of nowhere, because the purpose of being a hunter is being someone who is highly skilled at something and you seek further knowledge or furthering your objective in life. So while I did want to make some hunter classes that certain characters would follow, I want to work within the confines that we were given. Now, firstly, we have Jonathan Joestar. With his original interest in archaeology due to the stone mask and respect for the outer world, to me it would make sense that he would become either a ruins hunter or a paleograph hunter. A ruins hunter is a type of hunter dedicated to uncovering, restoring, and preserving ruins in order to revive ancient societies. At least that's what it says. An example of a ruins hunter is Jing Freaks, while a paleograph hunter is a type of hunter who specializes in learning and translating ancient and lost languages. Our only example being Pion. I really hope that's how it's read instead of Peon, because I feel like that'd be really unfortunate in terms of a name. Now we have Josuke Joestar. Now, Joseph would start as a rookie hunter with no specialization, as a rookie hunter is classified as someone who lacks an area of specialization, which fits Joseph's tendency to avoid strong commitment. This is symbolism for Joseph cheating on his wife. Something, adaptable character, something, you know how that is. Similar to how Gon and Killua started, though they eventually found their paths. Joseph's adaptive nature and tendency to get involved in situations by chance means he'd likely maintain this status by choice. Now, Jotaro Kujo, on the other hand, has the options of a sea hunter or a poacher hunter. Now, sea hunters operate in seas looking for animals or treasures, with Morel, last name being Makernassi, I think, being our primary example. This comes from Jotaro's interest in marine biology, but I believed that Jotaro wouldn't exactly be in this category and more so adjacent to it as a poacher hunter, as a poacher hunter is someone who is actually dedicated to the study of animals and protecting them from poachers. So if we had a sea related division of a poacher hunter that wasn't exactly a sea hunter, I feel like that would be where Jotaro would fit best. As for Josuke Higashikata, as a ruins hunter, that would match his stand ability perfectly. Like Jing, he would focus on preserving and restoring ancient sites. Now, Crazy Diamond's restoration ability makes him uniquely qualified for this role, as he could just restore these degraded ruins and artifacts to their original state. My reasoning in this isn't based on his interests. I think Josuke, as a person who had primarily wanted to be a model of sorts and just be an all-around fashion adjacent person, he tried to lean more into that area. So my idea is that he would use the money made from being commissioned on restoring artifacts and all that to do truly whatever he wants to. There would be a good chance that him and Jonathan link up way later, and as a duo, you would have Josuke as the restorer and Jonathan as the analytical assessment type. Which is really good because such a unique situation like this, like imagine someone has the ability to solve math equations just unknowingly, like they can just do whatever one, and the other person is one of the greatest like math people, I guess technically, and they can just figure it out and be like, oh okay, this is why it works, and they can explain the whole thought process. So that'd be pretty cool. Now for Giorno Giovanna, becoming a blacklist hunter aligns with his experience with Passione. These hunters track down serious criminals, and with Kurapika being the prime example, it seems a pretty good lineup, I'd say. Giorno seems like the type to just, do the hard job with the idea of becoming, larger than life once he has the position for it. And I imagine that while Kurapika might be inclined not to join Giorno on anything, Giorno would likely develop his own group, like the Phantom Troop, to where their whole thing contrasts the spiders. Now for Jolyne, this had been a good bit difficult to me because during Stone Ocean, Jolyne is constantly battling with her surroundings, so the chance of her speaking on, what she wanted to be before all this had been limited. And I think her options are becoming a rookie like Joseph or a blacklist hunter. Because if she knows that once she has money, she can do anything and go out learning into the world and all that, having a direct goal would be easier to hit. Plus, if this is the composite version of Jolyne, where she's everything that she's about, being all that, then that means being free opens up her avenues to areas that she didn't have before. Then in turn, she goes about being whatever type of hunter that she wants to be because she's figured it out now. As for Johnny Joestar, he has to be a rookie hunter. I think that if he wanted to push for competitiveness, then we had seen him in certain areas like the Heavens Arena, but he'd gravitate towards nothing too specific here that line up, I'd say. I'd also like to state that I don't think being a rookie necessarily means that they're not as smart as the other hunters or something. The idea is that he doesn't want to fall under a category if he doesn't have to. And if he has to be in a category where the only goal is to grow, then that's most likely good enough for him right here as a rookie. Now on Josuke 8, I think being a temporary hunter, or well, a temp hunter, that would be great for him as it's a position that has a good amount of people, not too huge of a label, and it's just an all-around good for a person with an adaptable nature. A temp hunter, not like the traditional hunters, takes government jobs from the Hunters Association with fees that are based on difficulty, and this flexibility of this style of work, it'd be able to fit his all-around, I guess, Swiss Army knife of power due to his, plunder and everything. He'd be able to handle a lot of situations that most people wouldn't, and plus he is really smart. But I guess the only issue is that he would not get looked upon by other hunters with like a more respectable lens. But I think that Josuke himself would most likely not care, as he's in his own lane. That's truly what matters. And normally it stops right here, but let's go about this. Finally, one of the most like blatant picks here, Jodio Joestar. We're actually going to be using him for this video. He would definitely become a jackpot hunter, as his main goal had been to get a lot of money. Now his reasoning on why he wanted to get on a bunch of money is gone, as his family doesn't come with him in this scenario. But, I don't think that he would just lose sight of his goal out of nowhere. Over time, he'd gradually pull away from it probably and make it not that big of a focus and maybe try to serve a different purpose later, because, I don't necessarily feel that his goal currently in the manga is just the end-all be-all for his thing. I think that's just more so a reaction and understanding of how the world works. That's his thing. But once he's pulled off, I think there'll be something different that he sets his sights on, but that would come later. Now with that all cleared up, now we could see who could get past the hunter exam. Now for those unfamiliar to Hunter x Hunter, you may think that this is just like a run right through as is type of thing with some sort of exam being about like physicality, but that isn't exactly the case, because it's pretty general. Even with that, it's pretty fair to put your trust in the Joestars. So let's go about this exam thing. Now the pre-exam, that's meant to weed out all of the people that wouldn't be becoming a hunter at all. So for the group of Gon, Kurapika, Leorio, the first ones on the ship, that was the step. Now those who couldn't deal with seasickness were weeded out. And I wouldn't worry about any of the Joestars here, as they've gone through way worse damage to their bodies before. And we've established that they have to become a type of hunter, and they're going to see it through. So the only one that I'm not currently sure about, but the future is pretty good most likely, is Jodio, because Jodio isn't going to be the first Joestar that hasn't been ridiculously damaged beyond belief and still live. Like, that's going to happen most likely. It's just that in terms of proof, we don't have it. And that's going to be the case a lot of the times if I do want to mention Jodio again and again and again. It's just going to be sort of the similar thing being reiterated. Now, that's just the first pre-exam. There's a second pre-exam where you're trying to get to the hunter exam. Now, you have to answer a scenario with two fake options and no real answers. So the answer is to not answer. Every single Joestar has a good enough assessment skill to get past this, but I'd love to see their initial reactions to said scenario. Someone might recommend powering through this and using physicality, but that can get you disqualified almost immediately. Now, the third pre-exam had candidates face off against the Kiriko family, shape-shifting magical beasts, testing their perception and character. Now, this test is meant to show intelligence, observation skills, and morality. Now, Jonathan's eye would be able to catch, subtle details similar to how he'd been able to, figure out Dio in general. His response to someone in need would be genuine, matching how the Kirikos had judged Leorio's medical care. I guess the only difference here is that we don't have to worry about Jonathan getting caught lacking, as he would definitely be able to defend himself, for sure being stronger than the people that would be attacking him. Now, Joseph, I believe, would be a lot more critical and run right through the scheme. Jotaro has dealt with alternative versions of people, due to the flesh buds and, different person entirely, Kakyo and freaking Yellow Temperance being different, and took him a while, but now he's better with his assessment by the time that we had reached the end of Star Wars Crusaders. Now, I don't want to spend too much time here, but the family is pretty well rounded in their assessment skills in general. Plus, they all have the ability to defend themselves even if they couldn't assess it, so we're pretty much good. Now we're actually here at the first phase of the Hunter exam. The underground tunnel portion wouldn't trouble most Joestars. This is just long distance running and you have to keep up, but I think Jonathan's Hamon training had prepared him for sure for this type of stamina endurance type thing. And Joseph's similar background means that he'd handle it while probably complaining the whole time. As for the stand users, almost all of them can use their stand to propel themselves forward. Jotaro's done it before. Josuke can do it. Giorno could grow a long tree, an ostrich, a horse, anything really. Like, you can do whatever the heck. Jolyne should be able to Spider-Man swing herself through out of it. Johnny can use the spin to just basically teleport himself to the end of this. Josuke could slide all the way over here. And as for Jodio, I think that he can make it difficult for everybody else and in turn help himself. My theory is this, right? He makes it rain, but like horizontally, and then adjusts the pressure to where he's now riding on these massive raindrops in the same way that Goku does Nimbus. I can't exactly figure that out. Like I'll draw it out maybe, but yeah, that's my idea here. The thing is, we honestly don't know about Jodio as is, and again, incorporating this into the video kind of shows you why I don't really use him yet in these videos, because it's so early into the freaking JoJo Lands manga. But that's here nor there. After all this, they have to deal with fog and a bunch of dangerous creatures, and I trust that everyone here can defend themselves easily with the artillery that they have. And a huge thing is being instinctual. That's how Gon gets this done. But I think that they'd be pretty good in their assessment, be weary, not trying to get into all this type of stuff, because certain people here, like everyone here, can't really heal himself except for Giorno, and that goes pretty far. But yeah, my reason on being able to defend themselves, Gon is a lot more instinctual than everybody else here, but being smart enough like Killua and Kurapika can get you pretty far. That's what we've seen. Now, in addition to that, almost everyone here, in terms of the Joestars, are at Chimera Ant Arc levels of strength, messing with this early game of Hunters. So it's like, yeah, they should be able to blow right through this. And I mean like Chimera Ant Arc and the idea of like the protagonist, because we do get extremely strong people just in York New and Hisoka in general, like broken. But yeah, now we have the second phase, as they make it all through. Now we're going to be going against gourmet hunters and then the egg trial. The second phase starts with gourmet hunters asking for pork. The pigs that they have to beat up are strong, but not strong enough to defeat any of the Joestars. They have thick skin, it feels like armor, all that, but they figure it out fairly easy. It's not that hard. Here's my thing. I can believe that this is an area that some of them all fail, though, because this requires them to make a good pork dish. That's the first part of it. And everybody fails because no one really has any culinary skills. Like, there's a bunch of non-cooking ass hunters. Now, the Joestars, unfortunately, I do think that they probably fail too, because, no one's really given me any proof that they have culinary skills like that required for this exam. And these gourmet hunters, like, they have gourmet in their name. I imagine that they have really higher ends of cooking, Now, when it shifts over to the spider eagle eggs, this becomes more their speed, timing a jump into a ravine. It's like, oh, okay, that's kind of scary, but, that's fine. The stand users can avoid the situation altogether. Jotaro can stop time, make his way down and back. Josuke and Crazy Diamond can both break the egg and force it to return to them with restoration. After that, Giorno can create an animal that can retrieve the egg fairly easy, like maybe like a spider monkey or something like that. And Jolyne can use a long net fairly easy, and she can honestly help cheat this out for other people, but that's like, it doesn't have to be her thing. Now, Johnny could also be able to use Act 3's spin portal to get back there and just help himself. Josuke 8, I think he could just get a bunch of them into a bubble and have them float their way up to him, or remove the weight from it using a bubble and have them float over to him again. Just it's really easy for him to go about this. And Jodio, on the other hand, here's my thing. If he can make November Rain sway them over to himself, that makes it easy. Or he can use the rain in a gentle enough way for it to work. Fine, great, okay, I'll believe it. But personally, I'm not sure. All right, he might not be able to do something like that. But I think that most people that scale JoJo and all that, they'll be like, "Well, Caleb, all the other Joestars are pretty freaking broken. JoJo is most likely going to be broken in the future." I completely agree. It's just that I know that I have to make the statement where it's all like, "Hey, look, he doesn't have the proof for it," because people will be like, "Hey, Caleb, I don't think he has the proof for it." And it's like, you're probably right. Like, that's just the case. But we use evidence from our history, then that makes more sense. Now we have the third phase being the examiners, because everybody solved their way right out of it. In the third phase, it's a trick tower into a prison battle. Most Joestars can spot these kinds of tricks. The Hamon users have an easy way of detection using any surface and finding life around them. And as for the stand users, well, they do have brute force, but for the most part, they can do whatever is required to keep track of what's going on. That and their assessment prowess, as Joseph isn't like the only smart Joestar. He's the smartest one. He's not the only smart one. For the voting sections, the Joestars are actually pretty good at group decisions when it matters. Like, let's say that they do have to be together as a team. They'd be pretty good. Jonathan has natural leadership to keep everyone together. Joseph is already good at predicting others in general, so that can do really well in terms of synergy. Giorno can... He can just guide group decisions effectively. We've seen how he had done with Passione. And as for the prison battles themselves, they're unfair, because everyone can win a fight almost instantly. And if they're working together, back and forth, they have two healers, which I guarantee doubt that they need, but they have two healers. Well, after this, what's next? Well, the fourth phase is Zevel Island and the badge collection. So essentially, you have to beat people. Well, you don't have to beat people. You just have to take their badge and have it, and then it gets tallied up at the end of it, right? So that's great. So each Joestar has tracking abilities in a sense. Like, they can do pretty well, very perceptive and all that, and makes finding targets fairly easy. Jonathan's Hamon sensing, Joseph's intuition, Star Platinum's perception. Josuke has, if he has a piece of anybody and it goes back to them, Giorno senses life. Jolyne has her string, senses sound. It just keeps on going, right? Like, we don't have to do this for everybody, but they just do really well for hunting, and in general with their defense, they're it's above everything else. The week-long survival and non-lethal combat requirements aren't exactly issues either. These are people who have dealt with much worse situations. Even collecting badges from others wouldn't be difficult. They're way above most candidates in the combat ability. And Hisoka is really the only wild card here, right? But besides maybe Jodio, who again, yada, 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 every Joestar has speed feats that puts them above Hisoka's level. It's just that, his terms of durability and intelligence is scary, I'd say. But this phase just a little formality. We have to move on into the tournament. Now the final phase is a tournament where you win by making your opponent surrender. Killing means automatic disqualification, from what I understand. Pretty straightforward for the Joestars, as they're not matched against each other. Then they're gonna be fine. If I guess unless I do that, then that would be unfortunate for them. But well, maybe that there are 100 people that are watching this and very confused as to what the Joestars are normally capable of. And while I do have a bunch of videos talking about the scaling and all that, I'm just gonna be saying that here. So essentially, most of the Joestars, but we have like at least proof for and all that, they get to what is called, I guess now, small town levels of strength, for example, right? And that would constitute as like, oh, okay, this is the destructive capability of destroying a small town. And there is a lot of nuance with that. It's just like, wait, does one punch just blow through the whole thing? It's like not exactly. Sometimes it's just over the course of amount of time, like they have the energy required in their body to take care of this throughout a good amount of time, and yada yada yada. But there's nuance with that in general, but yeah, that's kind of the case. And in terms of speed, they're capable of massively faster than light, which is, a very surprising thing. As hunter characters, they get to, hypersonic, supersonic, yada yada yada. But essentially the idea is that they're under the JoJo characters. So the only stipulations that I would have is that while, the majority of the JoJo characters are strong, at least the characters that we have here, the Joestars, going against these hunter characters, it's like, okay, they'll blow right through them. And I used that Chimera Antar comparison earlier, and that's really the truth. The only exception, being Hisoka and Illumi. I'd say that them just being strong the whole time and holding back essentially this whole time is, that's a big focus to have. And even with the speed difference in mind, where the Joestars have just this class to just outdo them completely in terms of speed, they are very smart hunters and very capable hunters. So those are the only two people that I would have these stipulations. The idea is that they beat the majority of these hunter characters. So that's why I'd say, yes, they make it through. In terms of seeding, that might be the issue, because it is a tournament and all that. But I'm going to say pretty definitively that the Joestars just become hunters. And unfortunately, they could definitely stop the main cast from becoming hunters in the future. But, let's just say that there's a happy ending. We just give everybody the same thing and yada, yada, yada. Because what happens is, if they don't, is like a whole another year or something like that, and they have to go enter again. That's gonna be a timely thing, it'd be unfortunate. But I think Killua had to do that too anyways. But yeah, Jodio also being another stipulation, but we already know that. Just making sure that's reinforced, and people can't say that I didn't say that. But after they become hunters, because they will become hunters from this. After they become hunters, they'll have to be tested again still. That's the idea, because they have to be tested for learning Nen. And, which I do think that they do learn Nen. I think I have a pretty strong idea of what their types are going to be. And this might not exactly matter too much, but I'd love to bring it up because I think that it would be great to line it up with the people around them. All right, so firstly, well, this is going to be our Nen analysis. So firstly, we have Jonathan Joestar, him being a pure enhancer. Enhancers are simple, determined, never lie. They hide nothing and act straightforwardly based on their feelings, And Jonathan embodies this perfectly through his honest nature, his direct approach to conflict, and even facing deception, he maintains his straightforward path. He has a lack of ulterior motives, and his pure determination matches him with the profile completely. Next, we have Josuke Joestar, to which I think he's primarily a transmuter, secondary manipulator. Now, transmuters are supposed to be whimsical, prone to deceit, and fickle, and they often put up facades while hiding their true intentions, right? My thing is that Joseph's entire fighting style does revolve around tricks and misdirection, and his predictive techniques show his ability to manipulate situations also. And despite being good-hearted, he deceives everybody. That's kind of a thing. Everybody can get it. So that's why I think the secondary manipulator part does matter, but he is primarily a transmuter. Next, we have Jotaro Kujo, and man, primarily enhancer. To me, primarily enhancer, and he should have had a secondary and specialist, right? Because enhancers are simple, determined, while specialists are independent, charismatic, right? His straightforward approach matches enhancer traits, right? He develops his unique ability like time stop, and that's like, oh, that's kind of specialist. And he's also, you know, a natural leader who gathers others despite his indirect, distant nature, which also is specialist. The issue is that, you know, in the Nen charts, a specialist can have some enhancer, like 40%, right? But an enhancer has no specialist. So I think my approach would need Jotaro to be a specialist first, ahead of being an enhancer. But man, that's just not working for me. I don't really prioritize. I think that Jotaro's more honest than he is like vague and all that, because that's a byproduct. Like, that's an accident, you know. Jotaro doesn't necessarily try to be so standoffish and away from people. Because his character is completely different. He's just, yeah, he's a bit different. But maybe we can say that, you know, he's broke the mold. Like, maybe it's like, because I don't want to give in new rules like, oh, hey, you know, Jotaro of all people is going to be the first enhancer with specialist tendencies and all that. And that just seems like BS, but I really do think that's the case. So however y'all want to go about it, that's just my thing. I'll do whatever is the most agreed upon thing specifically here. Josuke Part 4, primarily enhancer, secondary transmuter, right? Because again, enhancer is straightforward, yada yada. But they can also act on feelings, and this is shown in Josuke's emotional responses in general. He's capable of doing so and has done so for sure. Direct in his ability to protect others in his town, and his occasional tricks and misdirection show his transmuter tendencies like his father, right? Giorno Giovanna, purely a specialist. His specialistness, you know, they're independent, charismatic, yada yada, naturally drawing others while maintaining a distance. You know, this perfectly matches how he built up his position in Passione while keeping emotional distance and trying to keep that whole stone-faced demeanor, even though he had felt a lot. You know, he developed unique abilities that others simply can't recreate, obviously, through his stand power for one thing, but his application is a whole nother thing. He's really a genius when it comes to this. And he maintains leadership through charisma and execution rather than force like some other people would. Next, we have Jolyne Cujoh, being primarily a transmuter and secondarily an enhancer, because transmuters can be adaptable and unpredictable, often hiding their true nature. And we have the whole enhancer angle like her father and Jonathan, because, you know, very straightforwardness and all that. You know, she shows this in her survival tactics in prison. She adapts her string abilities in a various amount of creative ways, and she maintains like her lineage's direct approach. Like, I think being an enhancer is almost like integral to being a Joestar, but she, you know, she's more tactical than that, so that's great. Johnny Joestar, primarily a conjurer, secondary specialist. That's my thought process behind that. So conjurers are calculating and cautious, while specialists develop, you know, these unique abilities. And his careful analytical approach to learning spin and being very perceptive and understanding, that was a huge thing. Gradually developing more specialized ability, and that's showed in his acts 1 through 4. And he had shown typically like a conjurer caution in most situations. So Johnny definitely made for this too. Josuke 8, primarily a specialist, secondarily a conjurer. Specialist, again, we already went through this. Conjurer, analytical, careful, all that. His unique existence itself matches specialist traits and how he had brought together the family, even though he's, you know, he's completely new to this. I think that's like a huge thing, because he had been both parts of, you know, Kira and Josefumi, and it kind of makes sense because you're gonna have people who would have like their own like 2 types, and another 2 types put to those 2 types, it's like 4 types. So of course he's gonna turn into a specialist. That just makes sense. And then we have Jodio Joestar. This, of all the things that we don't have like proof on, yada yada, I'm standing on this one. Jodio Joestar, primarily manipulator, secondarily a transmuter. Manipulators are logical, controlling, advancing at their own pace, right? He understands and exploits, you know, mechanisms. That's his whole thing. And he carefully manipulates his own situations for his personal gain, so that he comes out on top as always. He has shown transmuter traits in adapting into different situations entirely. And I definitely think that's one of the more easier things that we've had to do with Jodio in this video. So great. Now we can cover where I think they'd end up, but as for how that plays out, will have to be a different video. Okay. Jonathan Joestar, as a ruin hunter slash paleograph hunter, will find his best chance at being at doing effective work in the Dark Continent. I understand that Jing is our best example, and it's kind of our easy way of directing him to there. But in general, if you want to truly find and research what hasn't been discovered already, the best move is to go to the Dark Continent. Joseph Joestar, I think we could find him as early as the Heavens Arena arc due to participating in the tournament. Joseph has no obligations and he'd normally enjoy, you know, like an idle life. But if he knows that he can get a great check from beating people up that he'd be normally able to defeat anyways, he's most likely going to use that and also potentially use his elements of Hermit Purple to figure out the other person to help defeat them if he couldn't normally defeat them, and then he'd be good anyways. You know, this is young Joseph Joestar, and I'm using that whole Hamon and Psychic connection thing that had connected him to Hermit Purple and all that. As for his future in the franchise, I'm not sure. That's really up in the air. Jotaro Kujo as a poacher slash sea hunter would most likely show up in the Chimera Antarc as, you know, a world star level recruit that had been doing a lot of damage on his own, and I would be very surprised that Moral and Nav don't cross paths with Jotaro. Josuke has the opportunity to idle for a bit and then, you know, maybe head over to the Heavens Arena as someone who can beat a lot of the people there. But once he's done there and done enough, and he hears about the opportunity out into the world, we could end up seeing him on his way over to the Dark Continent to actually get that use of his hunter card. Giorno and Jolyne together as Blacklist hunters would end up in Yorknu, but that means that they'd have to deal with some of the strongest hunters that we have ever seen at such an early arc. There's a lot of talk to have about this, but you know, that's for later. Johnny, maybe the Chimera Antarc by accident, but I could see him actually just being a fifth person to Gon, Killua, Leorio, and Kurapika due to the fact that he's already dealt with a lot of the moral issues that they have to deal with and go through. So him joining would just be like having, you know, like a tenured veteran on the team, which would really do a lot of great work if you really think about it. Josuke 8 as a temp hunter, we'll be seeing him going to the Dark Continent, specifically the current Succession arc, as that's where that's where a bunch of the temp hunters have actually been. Like, that's just where they are and where we got like to know what a temp hunter is. Jodio, being as, you know, overzealous as he is, would end up on his way over to the Dark Continent also, but we would for sure see him hanging out in the Heavens Arena. As for how that would work with 3 Joestars being in that arc, man, that's got to go in such a wild direction in terms of like that potential 1v1 and all that. But you know, that's for everything for now. If I do expect to say more and talk more about all of this and how exactly this works in specific, if this video does perform well, that's all up to the fans and how they want to go about it. You know, 6,000 likes, that's my thing. And like 6,000 is how I know that, oh man, like y'all really came out for this one. That's amazing. But yeah, you know, thank you all for watching. Hopefully I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, peace out and Godspeed.